Right, so this is a nice question, giving you a bit of practice looking at pseudocode and practicing a couple of other aspects as well to do with creating and understanding algorithms. Now the approach that we take with this question will be the same for any algorithm question. So describe the purpose of the algorithm. Well, we've just got 5 lines here to talk about for 2 marks, so we'll do that next. But even if this was a much longer piece of pseudocode, you take the same approach. Just take it line by line, and in this case we're describing the purpose of the algorithm. So what we need to do is describe what's going on with this algorithm. Right, let's get my pen there. Okay, I'm describing it. We're taking the main parts and we're just putting them into plain English. So input number, and we could say that is ask the user to enter a number. Okay, that's the first bit. Next we've got this conditional statement here where we're testing to see if number is greater than 100, and essentially that's what we need to write. So we can now write something like test to check or see if the number entered is greater than 100. And it's important to put any sort of operators like greater than, less than, equal to into words as well. There's our 2 marks there. We could just go on and say what's going on with the rest of this part here, and we could just say something like if num is greater than 100. Now we've got output. You could write output, you could put print, but I'm just going to say display, show, display to the screen, something like that, and then we'll just quote what's there. The number is too large. We could also add there, otherwise display the number is acceptable. So that's plenty for the marks there. And again, the same process, even if it was a longer, more complex algorithm. Okay, so the algorithm only allows one attempt at inputting an acceptable value. So what we need to do here is we need to look at how we can get the algorithm to give us more attempts. And if we come back up here, you can see we don't have any way to repeat, so we need to use one of the loops we've been learning about. So the first question we'd ask ourselves is, do we know how many times this has to repeat? Because if it does, if we do know that piece of information, then we know we can use the for next loop. That's our count controlled loop, because we know how many times it's going to run. Now there is no information there that will help us know how many times the code's going to run, so we need to use one of the condition controlled loops. So that's either going to be the repeat until or the while end while. But essentially, to get the marks of this answer, how would you change the algorithm so it continues until a suitable input is supplied? Use a loop. You could add condition controlled, because we don't know how many times it's going to run, which would also be fine. And one of the 2 loops will be while and while, or we could use a repeat until. But user loop is all we need. Okay, so rewrite the algorithm in full using pseudocode to implement your answer to part B. So if we just start off perhaps with the while loop here. So with the while loop, first thing we need to do is we need to input the number. So we input the number and then we can test it. So remember, with the while loop, while loops may never run at all because the condition is tested right at the start of the loop. So let's test our condition now with our while. So while num is greater than 100. So remember, if we just come back up to our question here, if number is greater than 100. So while the number is greater than 100, we're going to tell them it's too big. And that suggests that the number 100 is an acceptable value. So anything bigger than 100 isn't. So while number is greater than 100, do. Right, so we'll tell them that it's too large. Output. I'm going to just abbreviate this. Okay, so too large, but in their example, they've written the number is too large. Okay, so output too large. And what we also need to do, really important, inside the loop, we're going to ask them to input the number again. If we don't, the loop will never stop. Because we're not going to be coming back up to this line at the top here, we're going to be stuck inside everything underneath this line here. So we tell them it's too large, we'll ask them to input the number again, and then we end while here. And what that means is this is just going to keep going around and around these two lines until we've met the condition we've set at the start of the loop. Okay, so while the number is greater than 100, if that's true, we're going to be stuck inside this loop. So let's have a look. So if let's say we type in 110, input number 110. 110 is greater than 100, so we are going to do this code. We'll output it's too large. We'll input the number again. Now let's say they input 90 this time. So we get to the end while, we come back up to the top, we test what they've just typed in. They've typed in 90, so 90 isn't bigger than 100, so now this is false, meaning this code won't run, which means we drop out of the loop. And we just need to remember to add, I'm just coming back up to the code here, output number is acceptable. So we can output that here. And let's say num is acceptable. Right, so that's using a while, end while loop. Now I've already written out the code for the repeat until. So again, we'll input the number and then we'll write our repeat statement. Now inside here we're going to test. They've typed the number, we're going to test to see if it's greater than 100. If number is greater than 100, then we'll output number too large, and then we can just do our end if. Now once we've done that, again we need to input the number inside the loop. So they've input the number and then we test it at the end. So remember, with the while, end while, we test the condition at the start. With the repeat until, we test the condition at the end. And again, remembering to input the number inside the loop. Right, so we're testing that until number is less than or equal to 100. Because if the number is less than 100, or it is 100, we want the loop to stop. Because remember, 100 is an acceptable value. And finally, once that loop stops, we just need to output again num acceptable. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, so that's those two. Best thing to do with this is to just get the question, practice writing the answers, and then if you need to, come back to the video and just see how you're getting on, and keep doing it until you can write those out. Okay, thanks very much.